CURES is sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore cutting-edge wellness from credible sources. And January is actually Mental Wellness Month. I love that it's called Mental Wellness Month, as we want to focus on feeling good. And this really makes it the perfect time to set some new intentions. Notice I said intentions, a little gentler than resolutions. But when it comes to our mental health, Dr. Laura Saunders is a psychologist with the Premier Institute of Living with Hartford Healthcare. She's joining us now with simple things we can all do to embrace well-being. Just saying embracing well-being makes me feel good, Dr. Saunders.
Yes, Kara. So I love these awareness months. So every month when I'm looking up my segments and looking at what you want to do on Kara's Cures, I love to look at the awareness months because it gives us great ideas as a way to highlight some aspect of mental health or emotional well-being. So yes, January is Mental Wellness Month, and as you said on Great Day, you like it better because it doesn't say mental illness.
Right.
And so it's focusing on the aspects of mental well-being. And then also, as you indicated, we're not like pounding in resolutions. We are providing guidelines to improve the quality of our life.
Yeah, just the idea of even thinking about well-being and how we want to treat ourselves better. And that's what I love about these key aspects of mental well-being that we're going to talk about. You've got several. None of them really cost, not even really, none of them cost any money. None of them are difficult to do. And they really, you say, can make big changes in our life if we practice some of this stuff.
Absolutely. Right. So let's talk first about some of the key aspects of what mental well-being is, right? The first part to this is having a little bit more of an emotional balance. We all know those people who are a little overly negative, right? And you think to yourself, why can't you just focus a little bit on the positives, right? And it's not that easy. It's just, kind of shifting from one to the other. But for any of us or each of us, allowing yourself to experience and focus on positive emotions. We all have bad days. We all get upset and frustrated and angry and disappointed. But we also find moments of peace, or we find something funny to laugh about, or something brings us a little bit of joy, right? So it's really allowing yourself to experience and feel positive emotions. It will also help us manage stress more effectively.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying is consciously looking for those glimmers instead of focusing on the triggers of this makes me upset. What do I do? This makes me upset. If we instead just shift our focus to, oh, I really like that the sun is shining. That makes a big difference in our outlook and in our daily feelings.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like when we've talked about gratitude, right? It's a shift in your focus. It doesn't necessarily mean that your whole world is changing, but I can look outside and I can say it's a very gray day today, or I can shift my focus and say, well, it's in the 40s, which is a little bit more temperate than when it was in the 20s and 30s a couple weeks ago, right? So if you allow the positivity to come in and you shift your focus a little bit, it helps provide a little bit more emotional balance.
You take me back to a story that I did. It was an in-depth story that we did about how in places like Norway and Norwegian countries, how they view winter. And they love it, right? And it's freezing and it's dark all the time. And yet they celebrate being cozy and they celebrate cocoa. And we interviewed these folks from over there about how they feel about it. And they have such a different mindset than we do. Yet their winter's way worse than Connecticut. So yeah. What you're saying is the power of our choice, of our mindset, of how we want to look at something is freedom.
Right. It is. And it's not pretending that nothing bad is happening, right? If you're in that area of the world, it's not pretending that it's actually light out all day, right? You know that it's dark all day or dark for the majority of the day, and you plan accordingly, right? And that sort of leads us into our next one, which is, in our psychological health, it's having a sense of purpose, right? I like to call it structure, or I also talk about like anchoring things, like you have anchor events, but your psychological health is based on having a sense of purpose and creating some kind of daily fulfillment in terms of being open and growing, kind of a growth mindset.
Which is interesting because in psychology, what you're telling about for our psychological health, having a sense of purpose is not necessarily having a grand purpose. We don't all have to win a Nobel Prize or speak to thousands of people. This might be, I'm making a nice dinner for my family. And my purpose today is, giving some love to my kids.
Right. It could be, I'm going to take my dog on a longer walk, or I'm going, I'm going to plan that dog walk around the afternoon time, or I'm going to make a special meal for my family, or I'm going to send a text to a friend I haven't talked to in a while. It's doing something and having a sense of purpose. I always tend to morph these things into social connection because that's what I'm always focused on. But it's having a sense of purpose, having, and your purpose could be, I'm going to get the laundry done today. Right. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to, be a rocket scientist. It's just creating a sense of purpose and fulfillment and bringing it down to small, measurable things, right? It's very easy for me to say, I'm going to get the dishes out of my sink and put them all in the dishwasher and run the dishwasher. That's great, right? That I've accomplished something.
Yeah. Well, and that might be if your intention was, I want to create more harmony in my home life, that could be part of your purpose, right? I'm starting by just putting the dishes away every day so I feel better in my kitchen, or these little things that I think we gloss over and don't give ourselves any credit for. You're saying we need to pause and actually recognize that we're doing something good for ourselves when we do even the little things.
Right, right. And right. I like the way you phrase it there. It is kind of taking a pause. And it's, if you say, oh my goodness, my whole house is a wreck. I haven't done anything after the holidays and I have no idea where to start, right? That just feels overwhelming. So that is kind of against your sense of purpose. And so, for anything, it's always breaking things down into small, measurable, what we sometimes say is observable goals, right? If I get all the dishes out of the sink and I put them in the dishwasher, well, then it's observable that there's no dishes in my sink, and it can make me feel like I've done at least one thing today.
Okay. The next thing, social connection. And that is the strength of our relationships. How important are the quality of our relationships and our mental wellness?
So there is more and more data and research coming out that talks about the importance of social connection. In fact, that I love to look at and talk about some of the longevity research, right? So, some of the longevity research is showing that the way that you live a longer and healthier life is through social relationships. So when they look at all the different factors that affect health and well-being, what they find is that social connection is one of the most important. And again, that doesn't mean you have to socialize every day for hours a day. It means that you feel connected to people and to purposes outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. It can be that you feel a little bit lonely. So instead of wallowing in your loneliness, you think, can I volunteer at my local library, or can I volunteer at a soup kitchen, or can I do something to connect with other people? In a lot of the longevity research, what they look at is, the groups of individuals that go to the town square or the village center in the afternoon and have a cup of tea or coffee together, right? Yeah. It's that sense of connection, something outside of yourself.
So that's really important. And also, if I'm going to speak up for those closet introverts, speaking for a friend, that you might also be feeling too much pressure to be around other people. And you also encourage, we might need to notice when we need to just be alone. And a lot of people have a problem with being alone, but the older I get, the more I realize it is a requirement for me to have some alone time.
Right. And that's, we talk about the definition between introvert and extrovert, right? Introverts need alone time to kind of fuel themselves for social engagement. Extroverts need the social engagement to tolerate the alone time. But no matter what you are, we all need some social connection. So even an introvert needs, they can rejuvenate themselves and recharge themselves, but they need to connect to things outside of themselves on a regular basis.
Yep. And but yeah, just, I think sometimes our culture is that we need to be doing something all the time, or with people all the time, or accomplishing stuff all the time. And we talked about purpose, that's important, but it's also okay to learn how to just be and be by ourselves, which is probably an important skill.
Yes, right. And that comes back even to the emotional balance, right? You learn to be by yourself. You provide a little bit of, positive self-talk about what you want to do in your day. And you just feel more comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah, interesting. And does that come, I'm just curious, does that come with age? Are we more comfortable in our own skin? Is that part of our natural psychological progression versus our kids who maybe don't want to tolerate being alone very much or always need to be with friends?
Yes, I mean, there's a developmental piece to it always, right? I want young people, I want teenagers especially to be connecting with people outside of themselves, right? The goal of adolescence and your teenage years is identity development. Who am I? What am I about? What's important to me, right? You need experiences to figure out those things. As we get a little bit older and a little bit more mature, we don't have to be so sensation seeking in a lot of these situations. We have a better sense of who we are. We know, if you tend to be more introverted or you tend to be more extroverted, and what you can do to take care of yourself, but still maintain connections to others.
Well, we're talking about the steps you can take to improve your mental wellness. If you're joining us in progress, I'm here with Dr. Laura Saunders from Hartford Healthcare. And we're going to move on to some of the other things, but I'll just add that I was sort of awestruck when someone, probably in my 30s, a therapist told me, "You're an introvert." And I'm like, "I'm not an introvert. Do you know what I do for a living?" And she told me, that has nothing to do with anything. It's like, how do you gain or lose energy from being around other people? Like, you're going to need to put yourself on ice sometimes, or you're going to get burnt out. You're going to have to just chill a little bit. And I guess now I intuitively know that. But if you had asked me, again, this took me till my 30s to figure that out. And I'm married to a pure extrovert who loves to just go to stores all day and talk to people. Like, he just, needs to do that. We joke that, like, I have the schedule where I don't get any alone time. He has a schedule where he has too much. Like, we should be reversed or something. But so even just knowing that about yourself, you have to, taking that time to learn about how your energy system works could be really important for your wellness.
So I love that. That's a great example. And that's the beauty of maturity is, with maturity comes some level of self-reflection, right? And how I am at this stage of life is different than it was 10 years ago, or certainly 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. I too have a lot more alone time than I did 10 or 20 years ago. And I've come to enjoy a little bit of that alone time. I do tend more towards, the extroversion and wanting to be socially connected. But I've become much, much more comfortable with being alone and using that time as a way to recharge. But that self-reflection and that seeking experiences that make you feel better about yourself, whether that's socially connecting or spending time on your own, really is this whole thing about mental wellness.
And if perhaps people have watched other episodes on CURES where you've talked to us about studies that show the number one factor for success is not socioeconomic, is not did you grow up with two parents, is not any of that. It's grit or resilience. So that's another thing that we need for mental wellness is resilience.
Right. This is something I talk about all the time. And I do have a lot of worries that we have a generation of individuals that do not have a lot of grit and resilience, and that they're quick to quit things or not push themselves, or not use failure experiences as, learning opportunities. I mean, that's actually one of the premises of The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And it really talks about the resilience and grit, the ability to power through, finding a way to cope with adversity. And adversity can come in so many different shapes and ways, right? You could be driving your car and you could get a flat tire, and now you've got to figure out a whole plan. Okay, well, how am I going to get to work? I have a flat tire. Do I call AAA? Now my meeting is going to be delayed. Right. All of those things you build in, and those are like failure experiences, right? Or problem experiences, barriers and you have to kind of learn to problem solve. And what that does is it makes you a more resilient person so that little problems don't completely sideline you, and you develop a sense of what we call distress tolerance.
Distress tolerance, which is such a big thing. And I agree with the young people. It does seem a little different. Curious, as a parent, I think for myself, I grew up with just built-in adversity. There was stuff going on that I had to overcome. For my kids, it's much more of I've worked hard to create this traditional family. You know, no one's hungry. They got to work hard in school, that kind of stuff. But if your kids perhaps are not growing up with a lot of difficulty, how do we help them become more resilient?
I think it's just being mindful of how some of the smaller difficult experiences can really kind of produce a lot of emotional growth. You know, the concept of being either the lawnmower parent or where or the helicopter parent sort of hovering over, where we just mow down all obstacles and hurdles for our children so they have nothing that they ever have to manage. I mean, if you think about what goes on in a school day, or some of the things that you have to do if you play sports or extracurricular activities, if you're on in the drama or productions or whatever, you have a part-time job, whatever it is you do, the more things that you do where you encounter difficulties and barriers and hurdles, and the more you have to solve them, the more it builds your distress tolerance. If you're in your basement playing video games all day long, you're not really building much in the way of distress tolerance.
Okay. So sometimes it's not like we have to force trauma, God forbid, but like force things to happen, or, inadvertently, if you're not a family that's, doesn't, maybe you grew up poor, but your family doesn't have that situation. We don't have to, it's hard to say, you're like, when I grew up, I did that. They don't really relate, right. But just learning from daily life can make you resilient.
Well, but having daily life where the parent hasn't cleared all the problems, right? And, I think, there's another influencer, Scott Galloway, says, get the kids out of the basement, right? They shouldn't be in the basement all the time playing video games. They need to be out of the house and out of the basement and out of the house, having real life experiences, right? When you and I grew up, when I grew up, I was out of the house most of the time, and sometimes we did some stupid things. It was more my brothers making the dumb mistakes, and my parents didn't know what was going on, so they had to figure it out. They had to solve it. They had to, talk to each other, communicate. Like you think of all these little micro skills that build that grit and resilience. That's how you learn and you build a better kind of sense of self and better distress tolerance.
Absolutely. Get those kids out of a basement. All right. In the meantime, we're going to just take a moment, hear from one of our sponsors. We'll be back as we talk about steps you can take to improve your mental wellness, including how you might want to intentionally slow down. But let's listen to this.
Struggling with gambling? Wheeler Health's Better Choice program offers personalized support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit wheelerhealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
And we're talking about ways to improve our mental wellness because January is Mental Wellness Awareness Month. One of those ways is embracing the slow lane. Dr. Saunders, I gotta say, just the idea of slowing down sounds luxurious.
It does sound luxurious, right? Especially for many of us, some of us who are working and have families and want to have some kind of relationship with a spouse or partner and have some friends and see family or extended family. Just saying that sounds a little overwhelming, right? But finding ways to carve out time for yourself. As you said, as someone who's actually more introverted than extroverted, or more of an ambivert, finding that time to, at the end of your workday, have a few minutes to yourself, have a cup of tea, have a little snack, do things before the onslaught of the evening takes over. Finding ways on the weekends or time, no matter if you work a second shift, finding time in the morning, whatever it is, finding time to carve out some emotional quiet. That's when you can think about things, you can listen to music, whatever it is, take a mindful walk in nature. taking time for yourself, because that's what helps refuel your emotional and mental energy.
Absolutely. Like, I used to, when I was younger, I would wake up with just enough time to get to work on time, racing, racing, racing. And after becoming a mom, I started realizing the only way I'm going to have any peaceful time to just piddle would be if I got up earlier in the morning. So I kind of forced myself. Now I look forward to it, but to get up early with the intention of doing nothing. Of like, can I just have my coffee and sit without anyone talking to me? Because it gets harder as we get older. So we really have to be intentional if you're going to carve out time to be quiet.
Right. But I would actually counter that time for yourself is not doing nothing. It's focusing on self-care. It's doing things for yourself. It is, in fact, not doing nothing, because you might do little things, but you have the space and time to do those things. So that is your time. For some people, it's the evening. For some people, it's the afternoon, based on what, your family life is like or your schedules are like. But carving out that time, slowing down a little bit, downshifting a little bit, calling it mindfulness or me time, whatever it is. But it's so important for your well-being.
So are we addicted to stress? Is that hard when you first start doing that because you feel like you should be doing stuff?
I think what happens is it's the expectation that we always need to be on the go. Again, it's many of us who are managing multiple role responsibilities, right? You're a parent, you work in a field, you're also an adult child, and you have aging parents, right? We have all these multiple roles, and you feel like you need to be doing something. And I think what happens so often, and I will say, I think there's a bit of a gender issue in that women tend to carry a lot more guilt, because it is actually impossible to keep all of those roles in balance at the same time, right? It's shifting your expectation that, well, right now I need to, this afternoon I need to go see my parents and make them dinner and take care of them, right? And I might be not able to attend to my kids as much, but recognizing that roles take on different weights at different times, it's impossible to keep all roles in balance at all times.
Also, I think there's more and more talk about nervous systems and nervous system regulation and that kind of thing. And women especially may not realize this, but if you're feeling very snappy, you're snapping at your kids, you're snapping at your partner, you're just snappy, 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 it could be that you're just overdone, right? You need to just sit. You need to calm your nervous system. And that's it's just a symptom of being overwhelmed, that you might be very snappy and in a way that you don't want to be.
Right. But what's important about that example is that you have to recognize that kind of symptom in yourself, right? You really, you have a blow up with your spouse because you feel like they do nothing and you do everything, right? And in some cases, what happens is those patterns build over time. Well, if my spouse is doing it, I don't need to do it, right? Until until that blow up happens, and then you realize things need to be different, right? So, but I need to communicate that. So I need to identify what's going on within myself. I need to communicate what I need. And I need to hope that in this example, partner will step up and take on some of the responsibilities that are just kind of tipping me over.
Yeah, every now and then I get to speak to women's groups, and I say, I love lists. I know you love lists. And I learned that I should put joy on the to-do list, because it just reminds you, right? But that's one of the tips you have for us, is we need to actually prioritize activities that bring you joy, not just think, if I have any time left, I might do something I like.
Right. And that's just plain and simple practicing self-care, right? I've been developing the habit. I love to go on walks, right? Walks are so soothing for me. It's a little harder if it's snowy or rainy, but I bought some winter gear. I'll go for walks in the winter. It's so important for me to do that kind of self-care, because that is learning to listen to what my mind and my body needs. I know 100% of the time when I go on a walk, and I usually go on extended walks, right? When I come back, I will feel better, right? It doesn't mean my world's problems will be solved, but I will feel better. And if I feel better, my thinking will be better, and I will be better able to deal with whatever challenges come my way.
Also, just increasing your activity level. I love that you always say, move a muscle, change a mood. When we are sitting down too much, our moods can really suffer. We need some basic physical activity.
We need some basic physical activity. And that's another good point, because I tend not to use, with a lot of the folks that I work with, I tend not to use the word exercise because it becomes very intimidating, right? I talk about it as activity, right? So I like to exercise. I like to go to the gym. I like to do things. I like to lift weights. I like to do things that make me feel better. But for some people, it's just increasing your activity level. So if you did 0 walks last week, doing 1 or 2 walks this week is increasing your activity level. So we're not talking about, I mean, if you can get to rigorous exercise, that's terrific. But we're just talking about simple, measurable, achievable goals. Increasing your activity level is one of them.
And harshness doesn't help. But that inner critic is real. So what do we do to counter or silence that inner critic that can be so harsh?
Right. We all have this person inside of us, right? I've had to catch myself recently. I've had a lot of kind of negative self-talk, and I've really had to stop and take a breath and just try to release it and just try to focus on what's going on in the present moment, right? When we let that negative self-talk predominate our thinking, what it does is it just serves to tear us down. We need to, take on more affirmations of self-compassion and grace, just being a little bit kinder to ourselves. We would never, ever say things to someone else that we say to ourselves. And so, the guideline is, if I'm not going to say it to someone I care about, I shouldn't be saying it to myself.
Yeah. Or harshness to people you care about, which sometimes we regret later. We only have 90 seconds later, but basically replacing harsh is out, gentle's in.
Absolutely. Grace with yourself. And if you are really struggling in this last minute, if you are really, really struggling, you feel like your mood is so down and you're not functioning and you just can't find the energy to help yourself, please do seek support. Check with your primary care. There's all sorts of hotlines out there, 211, and you can get some resources for yourself.
Absolutely. Seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. So making sure that you do that. And even if you aren't necessarily going to sit down on the couch across from someone like yourself, there's so many online resources. I do want to say, if you're in Connecticut, the Institute of Living is a great phone number to call. They can connect you with folks if you really need help for yourself or your family. Dr. Laura Saunders, thanks as always for being with us and for helping us understand how we can improve our mental wellness, not just in January, but all the time.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you. And thank you everyone at home who's watching Kara's Cures. We appreciate you supporting this work. You can subscribe on the podcast if that's how you're doing it, or watch it regularly for free on WFSB Plus. Tell a friend. Have a great day, everyone, and be well.
CURES, sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.